All right, guys. Welcome to another episode of the match directing stuff. Today we're gonna go. I'm gonna get somebody added here. Today we're gonna go over some medical stuff. We got a lot of matches saying like, "Hey, we've got a medic. Don't call the cops or don't call 911 if something happens and stuff like that." And the medic we usually end up with is just whoever we can find, really. Hopefully you've got somebody that has the knowledge. Sometimes it's just somebody that's willing to do the job and knows how to throw a tourniquet on, stuff like that. But there's not a whole lot of preparation that goes into some of these things. So I just kind of wanted to talk about what it is that some ideas from an actual properly certified person. And we'll have a little chat about that. Tommy G.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, Jesus. That was the only British accent I can do is hello. All right, Tommy. So let me start with how the hell do you pronounce your last name? Because I can't do it.
Georgopoulos.
Yeah, nope. I'm not even. I see it
No?
written down and I can't say it the way you just said it based off of the spelling of it. Um, so give us a little bit. What's your medical knowledge? Why am I talking to you, basically?
Why are you talking to me? Because I'm the medic. Uh, so I joined the volunteer fire department in my area the year after 9/11. And I joined as a firefighter. We have a lot of need for medical in our fire department. So they asked me if I wanted to be a medic. So I was both dually a firefighter and a medic. And I've been being a medic ever since.
So you're certified as far as what?
State certified to be an EMT. There's 3 levels in the state of New York. There's 4 levels. There's first responder, which is basic first aid and CPR. There's EMT B, which is your basic first aid. There's EMT CC, which is critical care, and then there's paramedic. And there's different levels of things you can do based on your certification. I am an EMT/CC. I do critical care, and yeah, that's my certification.
So when it comes to throwing a tourniquet on or stopping some bleeding, that's going to be something that you're gonna know offhand without much thought.
Correct.
Yeah. Um, so the way you and I met was doing Area 8. Met you. You were the medic for the year. Maybe the year before I started doing it. But yeah, I met you through the Infidel team out of New York, out of Lipsa there. And I had you come down and try to be my medic every time we did Area 8 because you have credentials, you have knowledge.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm going with this. I'm trying to hit a couple different levels here. So we got level 1, which is going to be your normal club. And then you're going to end up with your major matches where there should be more planning going on than what I see most matches doing.
Unfortunately.
You've done more than just a match for me. So what are some of the worst? Well, I don't want to say worst, but what are some of the situations you've run into where their match director's like, "Hey, we need a medic," and then you just like, "Okay."
Actually, I think the craziest one was I was just a shooter. I wasn't working that match, and I'm not going to name the match specifically, but somebody needed medical attention, and there was no medic there. There was nobody that was qualified or wanted to at least step up to the plate. So the guy that was running the match knew I was a medic and said, "Hey, Tommy, I know you're just a shooter, but I need your help."
Yeah.
So what did I do? I kind of attended to the call, and I went back to being a shooter for the next stage, and they knew that I had attended to the medical call. So they're like, "You kind of missed the briefing, so we'll give you an extra 5 minutes for the walkthrough." And I was like, all right. So I did that. I swapped the stage, as usual, because your head's not in the game at that point.
Sure.
And the match director came up to me and he's like, "Listen, I really appreciated that you attended to the medical call. The least I can do is pay your match fee. And I'm like, no, 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 it's quite all right. And he insisted, and he didn't let me say no. So he gave me the match fee, and then he asked me, he's like, "Can you stay for tomorrow also?" So he kind of guilted me into it. So
Oh,
it is
but I
what it
gave you
is,
back your match fee.
right? So I kind of, yeah, lucky me.
Yeah,
But
so I hate to say,
it's something that's not looked at, other than you and a couple of other people. I guess the people that have been running Area 8 after you, they're doing a wonderful job running Area 8, and they always ask me to be the medic there, ever since you stopped running in Area 8. And other than the local people that I tend to work with, and local clubs that tend to host area level 2 matches and above, they'll ask me, but it's not really something that it's an overlooked job when it comes to designing a match level 2 and above.
right. So the things
And
that
it's
people
sad.
mostly concentrate on are like, okay, I need somebody to run registration. I need somebody to run stats. I need a range master. And then, like the day before the match or at the very first safety briefing, they're like, oh, medic. Who's got medical background? Something. And it's kind of like
Right.
it's an afterthought. We don't
It is,
generally
unfortunately.
we play a sport where we try to make it as safe as possible, but I mean, if something goes wrong, you're going to put a hole in somebody. It's not like you're going to stub a
Sure.
toe or twist your ankle playing volleyball or something. You can put a hole in somebody if it goes sideways. Um,
Absolutely.
and the budgets for the matches are not really there where it's like, all right, so we need to have an ambulance on standby, right? This isn't like motocross or any kind of motorsports where you see they always have an ambulance on standby because when shit goes wrong, people are breaking necks and ribs and puncturing lungs and things like that. I dare say we probably, I don't want to say should do that, but we need to have something in place. This is one of those things where I was like, how many of my staff, we've got staff that have been working matches for the last like 30 years. And I'm like, how many of you have actually applied a tourniquet, even on a dummy, like on a
Right.
bleeding dummy? And they're like, oh, I know, I've never done that. I watched a YouTube video one time when I bought my cat, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. All right, well, so what are the steps? It's like, oh, you put it 2 inches above the joint, and then I was like, oh, that's old tech. That's old news.
Yeah.
We're not doing that anymore. Like,
Well, actually, I'm going to give you a lot of credit because, um, and I brought this up to the president of LIPS just this week. I said to him, "You know that I have never been supplied any medical supplies or any refills on my medic bag except for one specific person, which is you, while you were running Area 8. And one thing that you actually did do that I've never seen done was you bought little IFAK kits and placed them at every single stage. And then you had all the CROs from those stages take a crash course with me on basic, first aid and how to use a tourniquet. So you actually have done leaps and bounds in comparison to any other, match director or anybody who's running any type of matches has ever done. So I
well,
give you a lot of credit.
I mean, that's kind of the reason I'm doing this is like I stepped away from doing the match director thing and I haven't really, been able to push that. We should be informing people, but hey, this is a good platform, so let's do it here.
Sure, why
Um,
not?
so there's a couple different steps. So first thing, you're always going to have whoever's standing next to the person when something stupid happens. That's going to be the person that can immediately start saving their life. Like you pump around into the wrong part of your body, and you're going to be having a lot of problems for that day. And you've only got minutes to figure it out before you're done. You
Sure,
know, and you see these guys that
depending on where
run.
it hits.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I mean, you got these guys that I don't fault them, but they're running around and they've got their battle belts on, and on their battle belts they have their IFAK. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And
Right.
have you ever taken any training how to use that? When's the last time you looked at the expiration date on anything in there? Like, oh, did they expire?
They expire? Really?
So
And I think I've told you this before. I've seen guys with IFAC kits that I'm like, oh, so you know how to use it? He's like, no, I'm just hoping that if something happens to me, there's somebody around me that knows how to use it.
right? Like
So I'm
I
hoping
don't know what
there's,
it
yeah, I
I don't
don't
know
know
what a
what it
chest
does.
seal does, but I know that I've got to have one in my IFAC. So hopefully
Right.
somebody knows what to do with it.
And I look
Um,
tactical with doing it
oh,
also. Yeah,
it looks super cool, doesn't it? Like
sure.
right next to all of my glow sticks.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's a whole nother tactical Timmy discussion. So, uh, I had one year I had got Techline Trauma, and I've actually been sending some emails back and forth with them, waiting on a conference call. But I had them come out. I was like, look, I want to pay for X number of staff to come over and take a bleeding control class, like teach these guys how to pack a wound, how to you stop bleeding. And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. And we ended up working out a pretty good deal with them. And they came out and they had the bleeding amputated dummy, and they had
Right.
some wound packing, actual like bleeding, where you if you didn't pack it right and you didn't get it up against the artery, it wasn't going to slow down at all.
Sure.
And it was actually really good training. That's of course an expense that you have to expect. But my thing was I wanted to like I wasn't on my way out yet, but I'm like, let's get these guys as trained as I can as we go. And then the year that I had you do that was because we actually ended up short on budget. And I was like, look, can you at least take these guys and remind them what a tourniquet looks like? I know they might
Sure.
not have seen one since a class back when they were in the military 10 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I'd like to see done more. You don't have to go too extravagant, but if
Right.
you pay for a basic class, have some CROs take the training that haven't taken it before and make it part of the match fee, but you're rolling that stuff in that can save somebody's lives. And I mean, you've been on, how many times have you, I mean, you shoot a lot of matches.
I
I
do.
haven't been to one except there was like minor wounds from
Right.
like a chamber, failing or something like that. But my understanding is just you being around is dangerous. Like you've
Well,
seen some stuff on the range, right?
I unfortunately have. I have been to an incident where at a match somebody had shot the RO by accident with an AD, and I was at the next pit over, and I got called, and it was. I want to call it the perfect storm because we had other medics there that knew as much, if not more, than I did, and we contained the situation. And another thing that we at my personal home range do, and I know some other ranges do as well, is we have a just in case of emergency situation. Like how do we handle dialing 911? Because if you call 911 and say, "Hey, someone has been shot," typical police protocol is they need to have either the police or the SWAT team come clear the area, deem it safe, and then allow medical to come in.
Yeah.
And if we handle it and we dial 911, we actually have cops and medical come together. We allow it to be a controlled environment that they don't need to clear that area. And I know some other ranges do as well.
Well, let's start with something basic. So you have a level 1 match. What do you
Yep.
think they should have on hand at that match? I mean, as like a first aid kit. You go to a clubhouse. Clubhouse has a first aid kit, and maybe they have even a defibrillator because it's mostly um,
Old.
elderly gentlemen that participate in club activities there. But I mean, what would you think a basic kit should entail?
Um, See, that's a loaded question because you need the something that can stop what the worst case scenario at that location is. And if it's a shooting range, it has to stop a gunshot wound as a worst case scenario.
Right.
Your
I mean,
basic first aid kit is not going to handle a gunshot wound.
no, it's going to be filled with band-aids and
Correct.
iodine and shit like that. So what I'm talking about is something that will, for the sports that we play, something that
Right.
would be useful to somebody like yourself that showed up. I need X, but I didn't bring my shit with me because I'm coming as a shooter.
Sure.
If X is there on the bag, what would that look like to you?
Um, basic, what we call a BLS kit. It's called basic BLS for basic life support. And it has your latex gloves or non-latex gloves, because I personally am allergic to latex, so I could not use latex gloves.
Right.
So I have nitrile gloves in my BLS kit. It has regular gauze, it has nonstick gauze, it has blood coagulants, it might have a chest seal. Your basic band-aids, because 90% of your medic calls calls at the range are for cuts and boo-boos and hammer bites. You'd have splints in there, some airway breathing in case there's a collapsed airway. A BLS kit, a basic BLS kit, has everything that can stop a gunshot wound down to a minor scratch or a burn.
The only thing you didn't mention that would be on my list would be like a tourniquet or 12. I mean, 2.
Well, tourniquets are technically not in a basic BLS bag. That should be in it, being at the range as well.
That's what I'm considering, is things
Sure.
that we, as people that participate in our sports, would want there. I would
Absolutely.
even go so far as like a splint probably wouldn't be something I would even put in there for what we do. I mean,
Right.
for basic life saving or life support stuff, yeah, sure. But I mean, so that's like just a kit. Like if you can go to your clubhouse next time you guys are at a match and you're any kind of staff, and you go and you pull what you think is the first aid kit out and look at what's in there and see what's expired, see if it has a tourniquet, see if it has a chest seal, anything to pack a wound. If you don't know what packing a wound is, let's get you guys to take a class. Like, I mean, I think
Sure.
this stuff is really important. And yeah, you can find somebody that has taken a class and get some information from them. I really think getting trained, it's when you're actually getting training from professionals that train, that's a whole different thing. You get a lot more tools to learn from, such as the bleeding amputated dummies, right?
Right.
Or the wound packing stuff, or how to do a chest seal. It's one thing, like, I mean, I took CLS in the military, and when we were going over decompression for a lung, I was like, it blew my mind. Like, how the hell would we practice this? But they actually had dummies that you could practice the decompression needles on. I was like, that
Yep.
blew my mind. Something new. Like, that's a whole different type of training.
Sure.
Not that now, going along with this, there are things that, as an EMT or somebody such as yourself that is a medic that is there to help, there are certain things that you guys are not going to do, especially if you've traveled outside of your licensed state, right?
Correct. So there is certain things that I am not allowed to do once I leave the state of New York, because I have been issued my license through the state of New York. I personally cannot give medication outside the state of New York. So most of my bag and my kit does not contain any medicine, so to speak, because I'm not allowed to administer medicine. Now, if my bag, it's my own personal bag that I use at my home range, so it is, packed with my medications and stuff that I can use, I just am not legally allowed to use it once I leave the state of New York. That's just the laws that we need to follow.
So, I mean, there's stuff like that. Like, don't go asking the guy that's there to treat trauma for aspirin, right? Because if, especially your circumstance, you're out of your state, you're actually not allowed to. You can lose your license
Even
because you gave
basic
your buddy
aspirin.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not even counting things like, dehydration and having to throw an IV into somebody. That might not be something you've even got. I imagine you might have this stuff there, but that's not something you could administer if you're in Pennsylvania.
No, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know if different states have different laws.
Sure.
So you do have different states that it's considered the Good Samaritan law, that says you did everything you can to save this person's life under the basis of you being a good Samaritan.
Yeah.
So, it's just, if you are licensed, and especially if you're a worker, if you're working as a medic in a hospital for a fire department, or you're not just someone who's been trained and certified to be a medic, but you're actually physically working as a medic, you don't want to lose your livelihood either on giving basic aspirin to somebody.
Right.
Because
I mean,
there's so many things that could go behind it. Of they're allergic. They're allergic to something in that medicine, and now you're held yourself liable on
yeah.
making things worse just by being a good Samaritan and giving some guy some aspirin.
I mean, I get it. So there's a distinction between the guy that he's a heat casualty, he's down, if you don't get an IV into him, he's probably not going to make it to the hospital, let alone through the day. And there's a difference between that guy and the guy that's like, oh, dude, I'm so hungover from last night. The staff party was lit. And you're like, no, no, absolutely not.
Sorry,
Go to walk in. They'll take care of you there.
right? You could have stopped at the Weiss on the way here and grabbed yourself some aspirin if you needed it.
Right. So, I mean, now we're talking about a basic level one. They having something there to provide to the club, to the event that you're having there, your local match. Um, Hoping that somebody is at least knowledgeable enough to use these tools that are there. But you also need to, like you said, you need to have a plan. So the plan would be, hey, don't have the 12 people on the squad call in 911. We have a procedure that we've researched, that we've talked about with the local handlers on how we would relay the information to them that we need an ambulance. And it can be something as mundane as, yes, we do need an ambulance. The address I have for you is not actually the mailbox number, because if you use that, you end up down the street in a farm, so
Yeah,
it's stuff like that. So don't, if you are just a shooter on the squad and something happens, first thing you need to do, as soon as that person is getting the immediate critical care they need to stem that bleeding, is call the people in charge of the match and have
sure.
them handle how to contact the maybe 30 seconds to a minute it takes to get them involved. Will save, it'll probably get but the ambulance there faster than if you called 911 and tried to relay what's going on. So
Right.
um
And so I've heard of some matches, and sometimes we'll do this as well when we host a larger than a local match. Is we'll inform the local, police department and fire department, like, hey, we're hosting a big match. This is exactly where our address and location is. As a heads up, God forbid we need you. We usually will call you, and we will have the whole area safe, so both police and medics can come at the same time. And even giving them a heads up, they appreciate it. And if it's a light weekend, they might not keep it heavy, but keep it as a standard occupancy instead of a light weekend.
yeah.
So,
And you're also building a rapport with the people there, so that's
of
never a
course,
bad thing. But yeah, letting them have a plan. If you are a match director and you haven't thought about this before, please consider just calling up the emergency people that would handle your call and try to find out from them what they would expect for a situation like that. Like, should the verbiage be, somebody got shot, I need an ambulance here right away, or should it be like, we're having an event, there was an accidental discharge, and we have somebody that was bleeding, we stem the bleeding, please send an ambulance.
right.
And there's all kinds of different ways to handle this. So have that conversation and know ahead of time, especially know what number to call. Maybe 911 is not going to be the right number for your local area.
Not always, no.
So, we're there's nothing stopping the local club from taking the next step that I want to talk about, which is maybe get some training for your guys.
Absolutely.
You got staff that help you out every weekend you're there. Why not look at getting those guys, part of their perk for helping you out all the time is, hey, you guys want to come and get some proper training,
And it's something that they would have to consider to budget that in, because it's, having proper training is not cheap. And some ranges might not have the budget, or might use the budget for something else because that's the last thing they think of.
Yeah.
When technically, like at my range, we tell people we shoot real guns with real bullets. Anything can happen. As safe as the sport is, you know, anything can happen. So the more trained, the more aware that we are, the better off that, bad situation is.
Well, let's think about it, right? So things do happen. First off, definitely things do happen. Now we've got an influx of new shooters, new to the sport, new to gun handling, new to gun ownership, in the way that we do it. And
Sure.
if we're not actually
kind of considering that and saying, holy crap, the last match we had here, we had 12 new shooters. It's a 50 shooter club on a normal weekend. Maybe we need to consider where those guns are. Yeah, you're going to try to stop them, but man, if that guy falls down and the round goes off, somebody's bleeding, what are you going to do? Are you ready?
Right.
Do you have even a basic tourniquet in your bag? I don't know.
And a lot of ranges don't. A lot of ranges, I've been to a range where I've taken a major spill, and the guy's like, "I'm going to get you the first aid kit," and it was 3 Band-Aids from 1972.
Holy
I don't
crap.
even think the glue stick, even work. But whatever.
Even Gauze expires, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of what I'd like to see. You go to a level 2, level 3 match. You got a bigger budget now. Hopefully a discussion like this might get you, started up on it. Even if it's like, look, guys, I can't cover the full cost. If you guys help me cover the cost, it's a 20-person class. If you chip in your $50, that'll get you the training, the dummy, and everything. And then I also worked up a deal with this other sponsor that will meet you halfway on a tourniquet or on a wound packing kit for your wallet. What comes to mind there is Filster, because that year that I did that, I got Techline Trauma, who came out and did the training, and I worked with Filster to make sure that the guys had some kits, or at least were able to meet us part way with the kits.
Nice.
And it's one of those things. It's like the year I went so far as, like you said, to fill your bag. And I was like, look, you're doing this job. I know you're doing this job other places. I've got a pretty big budget for running a level 3 match. So tell me what bag and what you want in it. And the match will pay for that. Because
Right.
to me, that's such an important thing to have there, is the person with the knowledge and the tools. Because if you have one or the other, you're you're probably better off with somebody that's got knowledge and not tools. But if
Right.
you got tools and not knowledge, it's not all working as it could be. So,
Well, let me tell you, like the most times I've had to refill my kit, either, and I hope nobody from my fire department is listening, either I would go to my own ambulance and replenish it, because next time I'd go to a call, we go to the hospital, we replenish it from the hospital.
Sure.
Or sometimes when I'll go to the hospital, it's not technically, stealing, because I'm replenishing a kit.
Yeah.
It just so happens to be my personal kit. Somebody was injured and somebody got hurt.
Yeah.
And I talked to the ER staff, and they're really nice. I'm like, listen, I have a personal kit that I have.
Yeah.
I use this, and this. And they're like, oh, yeah, go ahead. Take whatever you need.
Yeah.
And some ERs are like, no. Unless you used it for this call, you can't replenish it.
Different budget constraints and
Sure.
and things like that. But I mean, what I hear is that they understand that you've used that stuff not because you needed to seal up a leaking pipe in your house. It's because you had to seal up a leaking person. So
Exactly.
you'll probably use it for that again, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about this, we've talked about the local side, maybe getting your guys some training, and I've talked about sponsorships before on here, and in my eyes, again, I'm looking for people to help support a match instead of just throwing some stuff at you to try to get some business. So if you can find somebody that does training like that and meet them part way for a sponsorship, or part of the sponsorship is, the cost of training a couple people, you'll make your match safer, which is better. So making your match better is what I would love to see. So yeah, get your guys some training if you can afford it. Even if, like I said, you're splitting the cost with the guy getting the training. And then we talked about kits, but like, the cost of a proper tourniquet, not an Amazon tourniquet, but a proper tourniquet, chest seal, if you're going that far, something to pack wounds and something to bandage, basically hold things together. It can seem pretty expensive when you're looking at it online, especially you're getting it. You go on these things and you can find all kinds of kits that are already filled with stuff. You're like, oh man, this is great. It's already there. And
all in one.
And you're like, you get the kit and you're like, wow, I only had to spend this much money. You open up, you're like, wow, it's full of crap.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of filler in there.
So you end up going out and spending more money to fill it with things that you think are actually going to be more useful. So yeah, that, and there's nothing wrong with, there are some tourniquets you can use to do like recurrent training, right? Like you can strap them on, work them,
Hmm.
and then when you remove them, they're still as good.
Sure.
The basic cats are not that way, or is that right?
No. Well, the basic cats are not that way. It's kind of a one-time use type of situation. You can use it as a one-time training, one-time use, but when it comes to a very short lifespan of a product, you'd rather keep it for the emergency purpose than the practice purpose.
So if you do have a practice, use that practice one as practice one.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
eventually, what? Because those have a sleeve down the inside of them that when you're actually torquing on the
The
crap,
ratchet.
there's terminology.
There is.
Anyway, when you're actually torquing on it, it shrinks up, and then when you try to put it back, like, oh, I just put it back in my kit, and then it's
No.
just not the same as it was. You won't be able to get it on as easily. It already
Right.
be partly torqued up. So if you're going to use one for training, use it for training. But this wasn't really meant as like a medical advice. This is more like, but I think that's an important one because not everybody realizes that the cat you bought is not necessarily the cat you should be training with and then throwing back in your bag. It's not going to
Correct.
be good the second time. But yeah, what else can we do? So you go to a major match and you've got what you talked about the one time I had a basic bleeding kit on every stage just in case.
Right.
I look at them as umbrellas. If I supply enough of them, we'll never need one.
Well, you know what it is? The proper training, proper equipment, having ranges and match directors, keeping that in the forefront of their budgeting because it can be expensive at times. Um, and if not having the proper training, just because you don't have people interested, you don't have, and it's not only interest. It's you're asking a lot from somebody. You're asking, let me train you to possibly save somebody's life, but are they mentally capable of handling a very traumatic situation? A lot of people are not, and some people have the good intentions of, I want to learn so I could teach to save somebody's life, but when a situation actually occurs, they realize
Turn tail.
they're too deep, and they're like, no, 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 this is not for me. This is not like the training dummy, and I can't handle this. And I get it because it's not for everybody. Yeah, it's a lot of blood, and you're literally, you could either take somebody's, life in your hands and save it, or you can have done everything you possibly could have done and maybe not save that life. And that has another traumatic experience that a lot of people don't think about either. And some people who have thought about it don't want that responsibility. They're like, I don't want someone to die because I didn't do a good enough job, or I wasn't as properly trained as I thought I was. So you might not have those people to come up and volunteer to be trained because they can't handle it. So, having at least a resource of where we could find, hey, I'm hosting a match. Is there any EMTs that are willing to come to the match, or is there any USPSA shooters that are EMTs or properly trained personnel that we're willing to pay for their match fee? They shoot for free. We have a medic, and we're fully covered in that aspect. I don't know that there is a resource out there right now that can supply that information for match directors to have.
No,
So,
that's something that you and I briefly touched on the other day on our phone call. It's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around how I would apply that. While I'd be perfectly willing to get people's information about, what region they work and or are willing to work and what their expertise level is, I would need to be a little bit more careful about how that information gets shared with whom, right? Like, I just don't want to do
sure.
an email available list on my website. As much as I think that would be cool, I also don't want to just put people on blast like that and set them up for failure from just the general public. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
as soon as I can figure out a way to implement that without having to screen calls myself, maybe I'll get that going.
I'll handle it. I got your back.
Yeah. So, so I mean that is something that we talked about implementing because it, as unimportant as it seems to, unfortunately, a lot of people, you don't really know how bad things are until they go sideways on you, and you're like,
Correct.
wow, we were really unprepared. And I'm talking to gun owners, right? Like we're all like, oh man, I carry, I do this, I do that, I go to this, and I'm like, I would hate to feel like I've left the house, I'm in a situation at the mall, and something goes down, and I can't apply the skills that I've been working at for the last whatever 30 years of my life in shooting, and I can't apply a tool that I don't have.
Right.
And that's the same way I feel about this is we're all trying to prepare for the worst case scenario, but we're skipping out on medical. And I really think that we should start taking it more seriously. Like I said,
100%.
with so many new shooters, with so many bullshit things going on, please, if you're listening to this, if you are a match director or you're staff for a match, bring it up. Let's take this a little bit more seriously. I do have some contacts. Part of the match support is I do want to support matches whenever I can. I do have some contacts. I'm trying to set up something right now with Techline myself, and I will be reaching out to Filster again because they do a great wallet kit, but that's just my own personal preference. But if you guys have other input, if you're like, hey, I know about this training group in, Washington State, I'm like, great. I don't know who that person is. Well, if they're great and you think you had a good experience, shoot me an email. Stuff like this, I would love to put on as a resource for clubs to consider hiring these guys to come out and do some training with them. So, Tommy G, again, I'm not even going to try.
Come on, dude.
No. Hey, man, dude, I really appreciate it. You coming on and chatting with these guys, chatting with me, basically, which is in turn chatting with everybody else. Does anybody else, before we hang this whole thing up, have any questions about or comments about what we've talked about so far as let's apply some medical training to our staff to get people spun up a little bit, have a kit on hand, and maybe provide training, maybe provide a kit to the people that you've trained, and try to keep our match safer. Let's see, would be great to have trained medic in each squad. Yeah, it would be great. It's kind of,
That's just
that
a
gets real
regular
expensive.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like I would love to have an ambulance on every corner type thing. Is the way it sounds, the way it feels to me.
Sure.
We're generally as very safe as we can be with a bunch of guys running around shooting guns, but
I would love a medic at every match. Just a very well-trained medic at every match. That'd be perfect. Who cares about each stage? Just every match.
one that was thought about ahead of the actual
Right.
safety briefing of the match. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I got you there.
Just a thought.
But yeah, so if you guys found any use out of this, please let me know. Especially if you have any input as far as things that we can do, that would be great. A Tommy G in every squad.
Now you're asking for too much. There's a couple people might disagree.
The one we've got to play. All right, Tommy. Thank you very much for your time, man. I super appreciate you coming on here.
My pleasure, Bill. Thank you so much, and I appreciate everything you've done for the sport. I really do.
Not a problem, man. I'm doing what I can. All right, guys. Y'all take it easy. See you next time.
Have a good night.
Take it easy.